You know, I saw this meme a while back that was like, man, I really thought that quicksand was going to be much more of a problem than it ended up being. Like, as a kid, quicksand seems like a very common problem that people run into because of its prevalence in TV series and cartoons. But, you know, most people will go their entire life without having even a single interaction with quicksand. Um, it kind of reminded me that um you know the the stuff that you teach to children is going to end up being a very significant portion of the overall amount of knowledge they have. Like, if I were to learn about a new species of animal today, I could go on about my life and not think about it terribly often. But when a child is in a classroom and you teach them about polar bears, well, now a significant amount of their general knowledge consists of facts about Antarctic animals. Once again, a kind of animal that you are not likely to interact with in your life. I guess polar bears in zoos, sure. But like outside of that, unlikely to ever interact with a polar bear. I've seen polar bears in zoos probably. That seems unlikely, but like I've been to enough zoos that I feel like probably you would see one at some point. But then they do seem kind of out there in terms of animals. But I've seen penguins. Now think about that, right? I live in Scotland. I would never see a penguin if I didn't go to a zoo. Penguins are one of my favorite animals. I love penguins. They're really cute, kind of cool. And they have to walk very far. I guess that distance is getting shorter, but they have to walk very far because they eat fish, but they live on the land. So they have to walk very far to get to where the fish are. And they're very good at swimming, but they're birds and they can't swim. Well, a child would know all of those things, but a child doesn't know as much as I know about everything else. So if a child can rattle off all of those facts about penguins to you and not much about anything else, this entire sort of view of the world is informed by penguins, polar bears. What do you teach children? You teach them mathematics. That one's probably quite valuable, granted. But significant portions of these children's brains is taken up by information that I'm not saying isn't important. And it is interesting, children like animals. So it's interesting information. It gets them engaged. Um, but it's kind of interesting just to think about how, that stuff in the grand scheme doesn't come up that often. And so you grow up and you go to high school and you start learning about history. You start learning about, I mean, honestly, earlier and earlier, children are being taught about important parts of history, which I think is good. I know that my little brother was learning about like the civil rights movement in primary school. I don't think I was ever taught that in primary school, although granted, I didn't pay that much attention in primary school. I do remember learning about it in high school. I remember learning about the civil rights movement, but important stuff is being taught to children. I guess as time goes on, you know, the the stuff that is prioritized is chosen more carefully. Again, not to say that children shouldn't be taught about polar bears. And children will still be taught about polar bears. I just think it's interesting how, a significant amount of time goes into learning Polar bears goes into learning, I don't know, deer. Okay, you're significantly more likely to see a deer in your life on account of the fact that people live where deer live, and people don't really live where polar bears live. But, you know, you learn about animals, you learn about rocks, you learn about, like, sedimentary rocks and igneous rocks and some other third thing. That's getting more into high school territory, but I do think there's a lot of time spent talking about stuff that, you know, I've never really needed to know. I've never really needed to know. I think that's what I'm kind of getting at here is like, I'm in university now, and I learn about a very specific subject, which is computers. But even then, to describe it broadly as computers is kind of disingenuous because we don't learn everything about computers. We learn a very small amount about the actual hardware of computers and significantly more about the software. But even then, 4 years in university doesn't cover everything. Doesn't cover everything about, you know, software. You could do a master's, you still wouldn't know everything. Well, you can never know everything. But I learn a very narrow subject, and I do like learning, and I go out of my way to learn, but I go out of my way to learn about things that personally interest me. When you're in primary school and early high school, you're basically made to learn about things regardless of whether you personally find them interesting. You don't get to start choosing until you're a bit older. And so for the first 7 years of primary school, or all of primary school, and the first 3-4 years of high school, you are learning about stuff that other people have decided is important that you learn, or at least is in some way valuable. And that's a good thing, because how do you learn what you're truly interested in and truly passionate about if you don't have that step where someone comes to you and says, polar bears, they exist, they eat fish, they're bears but they can swim. What do you think of that? And some people will say, wow, polar bears, that's boring. I'm gonna go be a plumber, and I'm gonna plumb. But other people will be like, wow, polar bears, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. It's not the most interesting thing, but, you know, maybe I'll go and be a zoologist or a vet, you know? And then some people are going to be like, wow, polar bears, I love that. Polar bears are the only thing actually that I care about anymore, and I'm going to do something polar bear related. Well, those people are the people who will end up doing polar bear research. Because, you know, we need to know. We need to know about polar bears.